Over time, we've lost the most basic movement abilities our bodies were designed for. I know, because a few years ago, I failed every one of these basic mobility tests that we're going to go through today. But I also use them as thresholds to rebuild my mobility from the ground up, rewilding my body and taking back full control of how I move. And today, I'm going to walk you through each one of those so you can see exactly where you stand and how to start getting it back. So if you're ready, let's go and have some fun. Now, threshold number one is a flat-footed deep squat. And there is a reason why we usually start with the deep squat when we talk about foundational mobility, because the deep squat as a resting position is a gateway to a mind-boggling amount of mobility patterns that help you advance much further. And most people that start with the deep squat don't stop there and usually fall much deeper into the mobility rabbit hole. Not only is this a very natural resting position that we've been using for basically our entire existence, being able to do something as simple as squatting down with your feet flat and being able to relax in this position can have an insane amount of quality of life benefits. And there is one simple trick that can make basically everyone squat this deep, and that is this. Elevating your heels like so will take off pretty much all the necessary mobility you need in your hips, knees and ankles, as well as the necessary core strength and hip flexor strength to sit down fully like so. And to get better at this, all you need to do is just sit down and enjoy this position for a handful of minutes. Over the course of the day and over time, the more mobile you become, the more you will decrease that elevation until your feet are fully flat. There is almost zero effort to this, giving you absolutely zero excuse not to work on this. Now, our second must-do mobility threshold is basically just touching your toes while your legs are fully extended and your back is somewhat in a neutral position, which is the minimum amount of posterior chain flexibility you need to have to not suffer a lot of problems as you age, and most importantly, as you become stronger with other training methods that you might be using. Because strength without flexibility leads to a lot of quality of life problems that you do not want to go through. While the classic toe touch or the forward fold is the beginner level, over time, most of you will want to advance past that into a complete forward fold or a complete pike position for maximum posterior chain flexibility. Working on this is as simple as trying to touch your toes while you're standing. With only two things you should be mindful of so you do not cheat yourself out of your progress. When folding forward to touch your toes, try not to flex your spine, meaning rounding your spine and lengthening your shoulders to compensate for a lack of flexibility in your lower body by lengthening your upper body. Instead, start hinging your hip into spinal extension before you start folding forward. Keep your back fully extended and you're already going to notice a stretch by hinging forward the tiniest bit. Over time, you should be able to bring your fingertips all the way down to the floor while your back is completely extended. And that is a sign for you that you do not need to advance if you do not want to. With the second most common problem when people fold forward being that their hips start moving backwards to compensate for a lack of flexibility in their lower leg musculature, because lengthening the angle in your ankles into more of an extension will release the stretch you have around your Achilles, your gastric and soleus. Now, the absolute easiest way to not fall into this problem is working very closely to a wall, which is going to keep you from pushing your hips backwards while you are starting to fold forward. Now, once again, extend your back and just hinge in your hip the tiniest bit and hold this stretch for 20 to 30 seconds before you release it and repeat it once more. An exercise that is going to make this much more beneficial for you is both a stiff-legged deadlift, which is going to combine the flexibility you are building with a lot of strength in your posterior chain, as well as the Jefferson curl, where instead of using your back in an extension, you're going to go into full flexion, lengthening and rounding every single vertebrae until you're all the way down at the end of your range of motion before once again reversing this movement, strengthening all the surrounding musculature in your posterior chain and helping you strengthen your back in a somewhat compromised position where we are rounded when folding forward. Combining these two exercises with the classic stretch for the forward fold is going to make a world's difference when it comes to your quality of life. Now, the classic straddle position or the pancake fold was one of the first mobility goals I have ever worked on consistently because of the insane tightness I had in my adductors, which impeded my hip mobility to an absurd degree and led to a lot of issues I had with my joints that I definitely shouldn't be suffering from in my 20s. And while you do not have to be able to fully fold forward in this position, but what you should definitely definitely be able to do is with an extended back, being able to touch your heels. Now, thankfully, working on this is super easy because we've already learned the two most basic mistakes most people do when folding forward, which are the exact same ones you will be focusing on to avoid while you are folding forward in this open position. Internal hip rotation in both legs, meaning we're turning our toes inwards or at the very least parallel like so to actually hit our adductors, because the more we move outward with our feet, the more we're going to focus on our hamstrings, and we already did that with the classic forward fold. Extend your back as well and start hinging forward with very tiny movements and reverse them in a dynamic fashion, flexing your entire posterior chain in the extension, and when hinging, flexing your anterior chain to pull your body down. Which brings us to the number one trick that is going to transform any sort of mobility training you do, which is reciprocal inhibition. We've talked about this before. Your body's mechanism of relaxing a muscle by flexing its antagonist. And in this case, we want to lengthen our anterior chain here as well as our posterior chain here, which means that we will be flexing our quadriceps and our hip flexors, which are responsible for hinging in our hip and keeping our legs completely extended, which is in turn going to completely relax your posterior chain to give you more space to fold forward and to lengthen those muscles properly. And this goes for every single muscle in your body. And just knowing how this works and getting a feeling for this will put you ahead of pretty much 90% of flexibility and mobility practitioners. Now, by far, my favorite quality of life exercise, and the one that I do religiously pretty much every single day, more often than any other exercise in my life, is a classic dead hang or decompressive hang, which helped me get rid of shoulder mobility problems, get rid of this slump posture that I always used to have, because both my traps as well as my shoulders were really tight and I was always just sitting like this while working. Not to mention that this helped me build the necessary grip strength and forearm strength to truly advance when it came to my calisthenics practice. All you need to do for this one to get the full benefits is hold onto a bar and start relaxing into this hanging position, lengthening your shoulders, decompressing your shoulder joints, decompressing every single vertebrae in your back, and very important, relaxing your lumbar back and lumbar musculature to lengthen your lower back and release a ton of tension most people already carry around there. Which brings us to the next threshold. You should definitely be able to hold this position for 60 seconds without starting to cramp up in your arms or losing your grip. This is by far one of the most rehabilitating positions we can take as humans, and that's also because our bodies were literally designed to hang from things in this way and to swing from branches and do all of the stuff we used to do as children. Additionally, we are stretching out our lats, which also leads to a lot of tension in our back, and the lumbar decompression we're getting is also a necessary part on working on your hip mobility, because your back mobility and your hip mobility are intrinsically connected. So if you ignore all of the exercises we went through today, I would highly advise you to please just do this one, and trust me, in the shortest amount of time, you will see a lot of benefits, and you will probably want to increase your hanging time all by yourself. Now, we did the passive hanging exercise first because it builds on the next threshold you need to be able to do, which is being able to arch in your thoracic spine with your shoulders and arms completely extended. If you're a frequent gym goer who does a lot of bench press, or a calisthenics practitioner who works a lot on push-up variations, then chances are your chest and anterior delts are so tight that it is starting to impede your thoracic mobility, and over time leads to even more of this slumped goblin posture that you see most people naturally fall into when they are working or when they are on their phone. And I don't think I need to tell you how important spinal mobility is, because your spine pretty much is responsible for all of your body's movement. And well, of course, it would be absolutely amazing if everyone could just work on their back bridge. That is absolutely not necessary, because you don't actually need a lot of thoracic mobility to increase your quality of life dramatically. And you can easily start working on this in a standing position, and now using everything we've learned before, hinging in our hip and starting to push downward, just as we did with the forward fold. Now we are actively working on opening up our chest and shoulders, lengthen them, push them out, move into scapular elevation, and start lengthening more and more and more by both flexing your posterior chain, which is in turn going to relax your anterior chain, helping you to at the very least build the minimum amount of thoracic and spinal mobility, so you can move on to the exercise that is going to 10x the benefits you can get from this. You can use a soft yoga block, tiny fat casserole, or whatever you have, and work your way up to more and more elevation, on which we will place our shoulder blades, extend our arms, grab, for instance, a squat rack or a loaded barbell to fix our arms in this low position. And all you need to do from here is push your hips down until your butt fully touches the ground. And this one feels absolutely amazing, stretching out your entire anterior chain, moving all the way down to your lower abdominals, and giving you the necessary thoracic mobility to actually enjoy your life without much pain. And since I know that most of you are not really happy with just being beginners at anything, taking this exercise to the next level will give you even more benefit. We're going to pull in our knees and start rounding in our back, which in turn is going to flex our entire abdominal musculature and our hip flexors to strengthen them, and then slowly, in a controlled fashion, reverse this movement until our butt touches down, giving us the maximum of thoracic mobility before we move into the next repetition. And working this dynamically will help you get the mobility we're working on while strengthening and lengthening our entire anterior chain in our upper body. An exercise that, even if you don't do it for all the other benefits, just do it because it feels amazing, and it can help you open up your chest and upper body in as little as 30 seconds. This one I'm just gonna add as a bonus for the more advanced people here and the ones that truly want to get to a more intermediate to advanced level. A mobility exercise that, if taken to its max level, will help you build not only a lot of control, but a lot of full body tension and strength, as well as massive amounts of anterior chain flexibility. Push your hips forward in a seated position, actively push your heels down into the ground, and move into this reverse Nordic curl and start working all your mobility until you can lay down all the way and reverse this movement in a controlled fashion, starting with short ranges of motion, lengthening your anterior chain, actively pushing your hips forward to give the maximum stretchability to your hip flexors and your quads, and over time increasing your range of motion, carefully reverse and increasing it even more and more and more until you are touching down all the way. You can even push your butt down first to have the maximum range of motion before you reverse the entire movement. Working on pretty much strengthening your entire anterior chain all the way up to your chest, as well as stretching them all out, because you might be one of the people who actually want to work on a back bridge, for instance. And also because we have not yet addressed the hip flexor problem that most people suffer from, and this one is a perfect exercise to start working on this as well. Now, I'd say this is pretty much the minimum amount of mobility you should be working on so you can have an amazing quality of life as you're aging and as you're progressing in your fitness journey, because you will become stronger and faster. And if you do not combine that with the necessary control in your body as well as the necessary mobility, you will suffer things that you should probably be avoiding. With that said, if you like the video, and come on, subscribe. We do stuff like that almost every single day, and I will probably see you tomorrow. So until then, Captain Cairo, peace out.